Okay.
Yeah, let's let Lori take care of the waiting room while you're hosting, Deb.
Okay.
Okay, Deb.
All right. Welcome everyone to the third, I believe, meeting for the New Hampshire Commission Community Information Session. My name's Deb Hodgson, and I became involved with this wireless issue like most people when they or someone in their family has become ill. And for me, that was the case with me. And after figuring out what my issue was, I found out about Cece, and I had her come do some screenings for Generations Act in my town to try to educate people, because I realized it wasn't just me this was happening to. And then I reached out to our state representatives and Pat Abrami, who's an engineer, took all the information I gave him and did his own research and decided to write New Hampshire Bill House 52 in 2019. And Dr. Tom Sherman co-sponsored that with him. So it was a bipartisan bill. We all testified, it passed, and New Hampshire was the first state in the nation to create a commission to investigate the health and environmental impacts of wireless technology. And in 2020, they came out with a report with 15 recommendations. And this past year, New Hampshire House Bill 1644 was one of those recommendations, which is now in interim study. And I am a co-founder of New Hampshire for Safe Tech with Jen. And a whole bunch of us have been together for the last few years with Cece's support. And our purpose is to educate the public to protect themselves and their families and empower them to encourage legislators and schools to adopt protective measures, which finds us here today. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Cece Doucet. Cece Doucet helped her children's schools become the first in the nation to take precautionary measures with wireless technology. She's the director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology and works with schools, communities, municipalities, and legislatures to address wireless radiation in public health. She is also the Education Services Director with the International Nonprofit Wireless Education, which offers affordable 30-minute online training for schools and families and corporate safety induction. Cece was honored to co-chair the technology panel for the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference at the National Institute of Health and to present state and local policy at the International EMF Medical Conference in 2021. She's been featured on Genius of Wellness, Boston 25 News, PBS, EMF Warriors, in EMF Summits with Lloyd Burrell, Joss Del Sol, and Patrick Vanderbilt, and in the films Generations Act and Wi-Fi Refugees. Cece has been a tireless supporter for New Hampshire, and we are grateful to her. Welcome, Cece.
Thank you so much, Deb. It's such an honor to join you and Jen and Lori and all the others in New Hampshire who are working so hard to make the most of what we can with the incredible inroads that you guys are making there. What I'd like to do to get us started is to do a screen share. And can somebody give me a nod if you can see my slide here? Okay, great. So after we're done today, I will make my slides available to Jen and Deb, and they will put them up with the video that they'll put out on the YouTube channel for New Hampshire for Safe Technology. So thank you guys all again for everything that you're doing. That little MTPW after my name just means that I had the privilege of earning a Master's of Technical and Professional Writing from Northeastern University. And never in a million years did I imagine that I'd be using this skill set to do writing and public speaking on the issue of wireless technology. But here's how I fell down the rabbit hole. So I used to help run our local education foundation at the time when we were hearing about this 21st century classroom and how our kids were going to need the benefit of all this new technology to succeed in our world. So, you know, good doobie, we jumped in as parents and we did fundraising for wireless infrastructure, for iPads, Chromebooks, smart boards, and all of this that we thought was going to prepare our kids. And then one night at book group, my girlfriend Wendy, who's an electrical engineer, tipped us off that there could be biological effects from all of these invisible signals going back and forth and carrying our data. So being a tech writer, I jumped into the peer-reviewed science and started finding study after study all over the world showing all sorts of harm. And we'll walk you through the science in just a minute. But when I raised this issue with my schools, it was not an easy conversation to have. I thought it would be as if we had a gas leak in the science lab. I thought we would like protect those kids and the teachers right away, but nobody was responding until I persisted and I continued to share the information. And ultimately, we became the first public school district in the nation, as it turns out, to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms with precautionary measures to turn off the devices when not in use, to turn the Wi-Fi on only when needed. So don't leave those Wi-Fi access points and routers pulsing all the time, and always put these devices away from the body on a solid surface. So once we did this, I realized that our schools had indeed hung this sign, but they didn't actually turn off the wireless radiation and protect the kids or the staff. So I met with my Senate leader, Karen Spilka, who's now our Senate president here in Massachusetts, and I showed her the science. I showed her Ashland's little sign, and then I measured the radiation coming off of her cell phone and her district director's laptop. Both devices went right off the charts into the red zone. And they're looking at me like, really? And I said, yes. Is there anything that you can think of that we can do from where you sit to at least give the public the right to know that wireless came to market with no safety testing and it's extraordinarily harmful? So she put me with a lawyer in her office back in 2014, and Aaron Carty and I crafted a bill that would bring the right minds to the table at the state level, form a commission, and investigate this issue. We have been working on bills here in Massachusetts for over 8 years now. Fortunately, in your state of New Hampshire, things went a little more expediently, and we'll walk you through what Deb mentioned about the New Hampshire legislation in just a minute. And as she mentioned, on this journey, I've been so fortunate to connect with many of the world's leading scientists and doctors. And we have built courses that literally an entire school could be trained in about a half an hour online. An entire workforce through the corporate training modules could be trained in about a half an hour online. We are porting these courses over to a new platform right now, so we've taken them offline, but just reach out to us if you're interested. They should be back up sometime in June. Now, when I first fell down the rabbit hole, I was the only one I could talk to about this issue, and I wasn't even sure what I was saying. So I was delighted in 2016 or 2015 when Dr. Deborah Davis, who's a Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate on climate change, came to the Massachusetts State House with a panel of world-leading experts to ask our legislature for right-to-know legislation. And during that meeting, I was delighted. I was inside the State House in a standing room only room with all sorts of people all over Massachusetts who understood what this issue was. So after a few years, we decided we should be meeting regularly. And so we established Massachusetts for Safe Technology. We now hold a monthly meeting, and anybody from New Hampshire or other states are welcome to join us to hear what other communities are doing to move the needle to safe technology, to ask questions, to gain insight and inspiration, to find the courage to take care of this issue yourself, because there is no cavalry coming. The industry is pushing hard and fast to get toxic wireless all over our homes, all over our offices, our schools, and our communities. So lots of great tools that we'll share with you today to teach you how to open this conversation confidently in your own community. I like to include this link here for the technology panel that I co-chaired down at the National Institutes of Health, I brought with me one of the world's leading scientists, Dr. Martin Paul, Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada, who's investigated this issue and now claims that our public safety standards here in North America, both Canada and the US, are not protective. And we need to inform the public and fix our broken laws that allow all this radiation. So Frank Clegg speaks out as a captain of industry. And then we had Theodora Scarrato, who is the executive director of the Environmental Health Trust. And they arguably have the best database in the world on the science and the public policy with wireless radiation. So we were honored to have Theodora with us. And then Peter Sullivan joined us. Now, Peter is a philanthropist. He has also been a fighter pilot for the US, and he worked in Silicon Valley as an engineer. His health started crashing when his two sons came up through the preschool years. Both of his children wound up on the autism spectrum. So Peter had worked with other environmental toxins. He helped to get the mercury out of the smokestacks, and now he was working on the wireless radiation issue. And when I watched a lecture that Peter had given, I was astounded to hear him say that when his kids were on the autism spectrum, he did what most parents will do. You figure out that you need to get the toxic foods out of their diet. So he put them on a clean organic diet. Then he figured out to do the heavy metal detox because the heavy metals were not processing out properly in his son's body or his own. But now he says the first line of defense should be for every parent, not only of those with autistic children, but every parent, to remove the wireless radiation exposures from your home. And he said when he finally figured that out and did that and cleaned up the environment for his family, neither one of his sons are any longer on the autism spectrum. In fact, today they are both grown young men, well-adjusted, living their best life. And I didn't even know it was an option not to have autism once you've been diagnosed. So that applies for children who have de novo mutations, which means it didn't come from mom or it didn't come from dad. It came from somewhere in the environment. And even children who may have a genetic component, we see improvements in communication abilities and other behaviors that wireless can impair when we simply remove the wireless radiation exposures. So again, all of these items will be available to you in my slides. And I like to include this link because our talks at the NIH were all under 10 minutes. So if you have one shot at showing somebody why this issue is important, these are good, quick hits that will hopefully convey this in a highly credible platform. And then when I fell down the rabbit hole with this issue in 2013, there were so many people suffering and getting misdiagnosed. And we had a major gap in that we didn't have any way to train our doctors, our nurses, our community first responders, and our other healthcare providers. Thank goodness for the efforts of Dr. Lynn Patrick, who in 2019 put her time and energy into building out the first EMF, or electromagnetic fields. Those are the fields of pulsed microwave radio frequency radiation that come from all antennas and everything wireless. Dr. Lynn Patrick held the first medical conference in the United States. And then in 2021, Elizabeth Kelly, or Libby Kelly, put together the second EMF medical conference. Now, this is professional training for your doctors, nurses, and first responders. There are 24.5 continuing medical education credits, and we went through the separate process to get the nursing credentials as well as the doctor's credentials. If you click on this link, your healthcare practitioners can go take this training online at their own pace from now up through May of 2023. So excellent resources for everybody who is out there wanting to learn. So here's what I think finally got my schools to take action. When they looked at the legal fine print that comes with all of our devices, If anybody with us today has an iPhone, I would encourage you to take that out right now and go into settings. And there is a website here called See the Fine Print that shows what the legal fine print says in many different devices. If you have an Android, just simply search on your Android make and model or your Google and just put in RF exposure. So here's how we find it in an iPhone. From settings, scroll down a little bit and hit general. On a really old phone, you'd hit about, but most people have upgraded now. From general, go all the way down to the bottom and you will see legal and regulatory. And you can remember how to get back here later if you want to share this with your loved ones or your colleagues. Remember the acronym GAL, like this gal in this forum today showed you where this is. So general and then legal and regulatory. Up at the top, you'll see a little list. About 4 down, you'll see RF exposure. That is radio frequency microwave radiation that they politely call energy because it is a light energy form. They call this energy in the legal fine print. And what that fine print tells us is 2 really important things. One, they tested this device at a distance from the body. So if you hold it up against your body, up against your ear, tucked in your bra or your shirt pocket or your suit pocket or tucked into your yoga pants or your back pocket, you are exceeding the FCC limits for public radiation exposure. And those limits, by the way, as we'll discover in a moment, were never biologically safety tested. They also suggest in the next paragraph in that fine print that you use a hands-free option when dealing with your cell phone. So what does that mean? You could either do speakerphone and then set the phone as far away from you as you can while it's transmitting, or you could use a headset. You probably don't want to use the one that they may have provided for you because it has a wire that goes into your phone. The radiation likes metal, so it travels up that wire right into your brain. There is actually a different type of headset that many people who understand radio frequency risks will use. It still plugs into your phone through a wire, but then it goes up to a ferrite set of beads that will block the radiation. And then from there, the acoustics travel up hollow tubes, just like a stethoscope would, right into your ear, where there's only rubber tips. There's no metal, because remember, radiation is attracted to metal. So you never want to put anything metal up into your brain that's transmitting radiation. So look for a hollow tube or an air tube headset. So this legal fine print is by and large what got my public schools to have a major legal uh-oh moment, because they realized they've given these devices, the iPads, the Chromebooks, the laptops, to the children and the staff with no safety instruction. So once we had, our little sign hanging up in Ashland Public Schools, right, hangs in all of our classrooms, I realized that they weren't actually turning off the radiation and protecting the kids. So that's when I went and met with my senator and we got a bill introduced. And then I knew that we had a pot of money in our town because the Boston Marathon runs through our town and every town on the route gets some runner's bibs, and our town makes those available to runners who are going to raise some funds for the town. So I knew we had a pot of money. And so I put in an application to get a radiation detection meter. I wanted to get 2, one for our schools and one for the public library. So anybody could just borrow that meter, go home, gather your facts, and then decide what you want to do about that. That too was not an easy conversation. The first application I put in, they went, we don't really know about this. Come back next time. So I come back next time. And they're saying, oh, gee, this is probably more of a Board of Health issue than a select board issue. So they denied my application again. And by about that time, I had a bill with Senator Spilka that had come up for public hearing at our State House. And as I was testifying in front of all of these members of the Senate and the House who served on the Joint Committee on Public Health, as I'm holding up the science, as I'm holding up the sign, as I'm holding up a radiation detection meter, I could tell that not one single person on that board had any idea that wireless radiation brought extraordinary risk. So I started going to the State House and educating one by one every member of that committee and every other committee that had other bills in Massachusetts related to technology safety. So I doubled back to my town and I asked for meetings one by one by one by one with every member of our select board. And we met in local coffee shops. We met in some of their homes. Some came to my home. And I taught them the science. And then I resubmitted my application. And then Ashland became the first in the United States to have a radio frequency detection meter put on loan in our public library. I had to go before the board of trustees at the library and present to them as well. But ultimately they voted 4-1 to put one of these devices in the library so that everybody in the community could use this as an information source. When we went to that first medical conference out in California, I flew all the way out to California to meet a doctor from Newton who also was wanting to do something for her community. So when we got back, she and I partnered on a grant application to the Massachusetts Cultural Council, where they have a pot of money and each town can apply for grants. So Dr. Judy Safrir and I received a grant to put a radio frequency detection meter on loan in the Newton Library. And we also did a screening of the award-winning film Generation Zapped, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. And then more recently, out in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, Verizon turned a cell tower on top of a neighborhood at the very beginning of the pandemic, when every child and every adult was sent home and confined to their homes 24 hours a day under a cell tower. 20 people in that local community got very ill to the point where they've had to abandon their homes. One whose cancer had already been cleared, the cancer came back and that person has now died. That cell tower has been transmitting for 2 years now. And as we'll see in a moment, Pittsfield is taking some very courageous action to try and get that cell tower turned off. But a citizen went to the Pittsfield Public Library and said, please, could we get one of these radiation detection meters on loan in our library too? So this is a program that you guys can emulate in your community to give the tools to see this invisible toxin. Because if the pandemic has taught us anything, is we need to be vigilant about the toxic exposures in our environment. So right now I want to give you a live demonstration of what this invisible toxin looks like. So here in my home, you see that this meter is blinking in the green. That's the lowest level out of 4 levels on this meter that you can aspire to. So right now in my house, the maximum radiation that is spiking, probably from my neighbors, perhaps from a digital electric meter that I have on the other side of my house, I'm getting a reading of 5.43. Just remember the number 5. The unit of measurement is called a microwatt per square meter. So in a square meter of air, how much radiation is in there? It was 5. Now I want to show you what happens when I take my cell phone out of airplane mode. And I keep mine in airplane mode as a rule. I forward my cell phone calls to my landline because when I'm not on the go, there's no reason why I need to use mobile technology. I have far superior technology through hardwired cabled connections like my landline. So when I take this out of airplane mode, we're going to see what happens as it sends the radio frequency radiation signals back and forth to the nearest cell tower or the nearest router if you use Wi-Fi. So this is what our cells in our body feel all the time, unless we know to choose to be very discriminatory with when we turn on a wireless radiation transmitter. So notice that it's up on the complete opposite end of my meter here, blinking into the extreme area. So, and I haven't even done anything. I'm going to put it back into airplane mode. My pinky finger tingles when I'm exposed to radio frequency radiation in my hand. That's my tell. But right now we went from 5 to 128,000 microwatts per square meter. And that was without doing anything. I have turned this on and gone in and done something before and measured, and it went up to like 800,000. I went down to the local store. I'm going to turn this off now. It's back in the green though. My house is pretty good. I went down to the local store, and one of the gentlemen I was speaking with at the AT&T store had just upgraded to a 5G phone, and we measured his. It went over 2.5 million microwatts per square meter. The scientific literature tells us we want to aim for being under 10 indoors. My husband just bought a new stove, and when he got it home, I realized it was a smart stove, because now the industry wants to put antennas in everything for the Internet of Things. And unfortunately, I could not turn off the radiation transmitter in that stove. And so a technician came out, and it turned out when he pulled off the back of the stove, there was the motherboard that controlled the digital display on the stove. And right next to it was a chip that had the radio frequency antenna in it. All he had to do was just simply unplug that radio frequency antenna. I measured again, and my home was once again safe. So it is very helpful to have a radio frequency detection meter. I know some of your neighbors at New Hampshire for Safe Technology own them. And if you reach out through New Hampshire for Safe Technology on their website or through their email address, which we'll give you at the end, I'm sure that they would be able to help you figure out how to get measurements in your own community. So my local cable station has been great. Cable stations are often the last bastion of independent reporting left in our country, because most of our mainstream media is owned by the parent companies of the telecom industry, or the telecom industry advertising revenue is so great that they will not, these mainstream media channels will not report on the hazards of wireless. So when you sit there and watch your favorite TV shows, or you're listening to the radio, make a mental note of how many ads you hear for 5G, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. All of these companies control the content of what you receive as information through the news. I don't know if anybody watched Being the Ricardos, the new I Love Lucy movie, but it became so clear in there how the sponsors control the content of what gets into the programs that you get to see on television. So my local cable station's been great. They've done public service announcements with me. And this one is a 23-minute walkthrough of my home to show common exposures of wireless radiation that are present in modern day living. And then I show the microwave oven, I show my printer, my computer, my keyboard, my mouse, my daughter's laptop, the decked cordless phone. And then I make suggestions for how you might choose to lessen your radiation exposures. So all sorts of great resources, and check with your cable stations. Lori Schreier brought me up to Keene for a Generation Zap screening at their public library. And then their cable station was so wonderful to do a broadcast program with us to help educate in your community. And I can be brought in to help give that sort of education as well. So now we've talked about the science. Let's really look at it and see, first off, what the long-term effects are, and then we'll look at the short-term effects. So this study right here from the US National Toxicology Program, that is our government study. The National Toxicology Program is the gold standard in the world for determining toxicity of substances. They started a study about 20 years ago when 2G or second generation or 3G, third generation technology was the technology of the day. They went in expecting to prove that the radiation coming off of these devices was fine. Instead, after a 20-year study and an unprecedented 3-day peer review at the National Institutes of Health, they determined right here clear evidence of cancerous tumors in the heart and additional evidence of cancerous tumors in the thyroid and the, other areas of the body, the brain, and DNA damage. And we know DNA is the roadmap to grow a proper anything, whether it's a fetus, a child, a plant, an animal, a biome. This radio frequency radiation harms all of that. Every time a good study comes out, the wireless industry will get a hold of it, and because they own mainstream media, they will spin it up and say, oh, that's just one study, don't bother looking here. Well, right on the heels of our national toxicology program, $30 million study, largest study they've ever done, concluding cancers and DNA damage, Italy's Ramazzini Institute completed another large study on cell towers and their base stations, and corroborated with their research everything that we found here in the US. So we don't need more science. What we need is an informed public and public policy to protect us. It was the infertility studies that got me on my feet. I started reading them, and you can get to them through this link. They have taken male human sperm, exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating, and it changed the DNA. It slowed the motility, and it caused apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. So less sperm cells were viable. It caused all this damage in 4 hours of exposure. And at that point in my journey, my oldest daughter had gone up to college with her MacBook, which of course she's using on her reproductive organs. We had just given my youngest daughter a laptop to go into high school with, which of course she was using on top of her reproductive organs. And Kaiser Permanente and other scientists have come out with other studies about women's infertility issues, higher miscarriage rates for women who are exposing their fetuses to radiofrequency radiation. Neurotoxicity is a huge, huge problem today. Most people recognize that even before we had a pandemic, we had epidemic portions of anxiety, depression. We've seen suicidal ideation among children like we have never seen before. ADD, ADHD. Dr. Hugh Taylor runs the OBGYN program at Yale Medical, and he has done the rodent studies and shown that when you expose these pregnant rodents to radiofrequency radiation, they come out, their pups, their babies come out bouncing off the walls of their cages without a care in the world, as if they have ADD, ADHD. This is damaging the brain. Autism. Dr. Martha Herbert, who founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital, sees huge correlations in the symptoms that the patients in her care emit and what we know scientifically happens to the brain and the central nervous system with exposure to radiofrequency radiation. Dr. Martin Pall is one of the world's leading scientists. He just in, I think it was March, came out with another review paper which takes all the studies on Alzheimer's and radiofrequency radiation, and he shows that we are now seeing Alzheimer's happening not just to people in their 70s and 80s. It usually used to take about 25 years for those symptoms to be noticeable. Now we are seeing Alzheimer's in 60-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, and even some 20-year-olds. We are changing biologically the gray matter of the brain. We are introducing toxins into the brain because the science shows that this constant pulse of microwave radiation opens up sensitive areas in our bodies. One that we have is called the blood-brain barrier, and this constant erratic spike pulse of microwave radiation at billions of cycles a second in the gigahertz range, millions of cycles a second in the megahertz range. Boom, 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 boom. It's opening up the blood-brain barrier, which is meant to create a barrier so that toxins cannot get into our brain as the blood escorts toxins out of the body. Now with this radiation, we're permeating that barrier. We're opening it up. And so now we have toxins going into places where they've never been before. And we see parents recognize this in children who have PANS, PANDAS, autism, ADD, ADHD, and more. So we need to remove these exposures. Children are not just little adults. As this diagram from Dr. Om Gandhi illustrates, these diagrams here are heads turned sideways with the phone up against the little yellow dot, which is the ear. When an adult puts an active cell phone up to an adult's brain, it goes into our brain about a third of the way. When you put this up to a 5-year-old, it goes about 3/4 of the way. Or, I'm sorry, a 10-year-old. And on a 5-year-old, this radiation is literally absorbing into a child's brain almost the entire way. Children have a thinner skull because it's not fully developed yet, and they have a higher water content in their brains as children than adults do. And all of that makes that radiation more active in a child's brain. When we look at the science on short-term effects, this diagram here allows many people to start identifying with why perhaps they're experiencing these symptoms. Please know that the Americans with Disabilities Act already recognizes electromagnetic sensitivities. They have recommendations for how to reduce your exposures at work. And these are symptoms that many people experience today that they would never know to associate with leaving their cell phone on, leaving their router on, leaving the Roku and the Ring and the Bluetooth and the Chromecast and the gaming devices and the baby monitors. People are not sleeping well these days. This is a light energy form that pulses at our brains night and day. Our brain is waiting for the wee hours of darkness as part of our circadian rhythm. And when it's dark, that signals the brain to release melatonin from the pineal gland. Melatonin would normally then go regulate your sleep cycle and help to escort the toxins of the day out of the body. Leave the wireless on, the brain thinks the lights are on, and it doesn't release the melatonin. So it's no wonder that so many people don't sleep well. But the good news is, time and again, after somebody listens to one of these education forums, they come back and say, you know what? I didn't want to know any of this. I am so dependent on my technology. And again, the message is not no technology. We can have excellent technology. It's safe technology we want to aim for. But they'll say, I recognize some of those symptoms. So I turned everything off last night and oh my gosh, I slept through the night for the first time in ages. It can be that life-changing overnight because we know when we don't get good sleep, we come into a host of downstream problems. Another impact is headaches, stabbing, searing headaches, migraines that doctors can't figure out, nosebleeds and ear bleeds. In my own household, my daughter in high school got a migraine and she was getting nosebleeds. What kid should be getting a migraine, right? And this chronic fatigue. So what the science tells us is that for anybody who remembers the candy Rouleaux, it was a stack of caramels. There's something in science called the Rouleaux Effect. So that's how I remember the Rouleaux Effect is because of Rouleaux. In the Rouleaux Effect, it causes our red blood cells to stack up like this stack of coins, and they're magnetized together. So instead of free floating and oxygenating, bringing oxygen to all of our vital organs, we get these gloms of red blood cells stacked up like a roll of coins that can't get to where they need to go to deliver the oxygen to keep our cells healthy. So this is why we see headaches and nosebleeds and chronic fatigue, pain from unidentified sources, skin. We have little antennas in the outer layers of our skin that interact with this radio frequency energy. And so we see skin rashes. We have people who complain of heating of their ears when they put a cell phone up to their ear. I met a gentleman here in Massachusetts, Chuck, who actually is a graphic designer and wound up designing our logo for Massachusetts for Safe Technology. His leg started going jiggity, the nerves in his leg. were being disrupted. And his doctors couldn't figure it out. Specialists couldn't figure it out. He did his research and figured it out. That's where he carried his cell phone. It was damaging the nerves in his leg. So humming in the ears is another big one, the tinnitus, the ringing in the ears, heartbeats that are too fast or too slow, cognitive impairment. If we can't get oxygen to our brains, it's no wonder people can't think straight half the time. And then it was so heartbreaking at the medical conferences to hear the doctors give warnings that if we do not start reducing this radiation, we are changing the white matter and the gray matter of the brain. We are changing the way the brain works. And we can anticipate more societal outbursts like we have seen with the mass shootings and other streaks of violence. So this is not just happening, as I mentioned, to you and I and our loved ones. It's also happening to the plants, the flora, the fauna, and every biome. You can go to this link and dig into what the planetary impact is, but we have our pollinators disappearing. We have our birds losing their navigation abilities. The pollinators and the birds have a really incredible system that helps them to navigate using the Earth's natural electromagnetic field. Now that we've introduced this massive layer of electrosmog, we are dysregulating their navigation systems. And in some cases, we are outright killing them from the radiation. So another huge concern right now is energy consumption. There was a Greenpeace analyst as far back as 2012 who said if the cloud were a country, it would be the 5th largest consumer of energy in the world. And look what we've done in the last decade to increase the amount of energy we are using. There's also horrific issues with mineral extraction down in the Congo and elsewhere. There are many, many minerals that are required in every single one of our wireless devices and technology devices, that if we knew what was happening to get those minerals to children and adults, we would never let the industry talk us into just willy-nilly getting rid of what we already have that's still working perfectly fine to upgrade to the brightest bell and whistle that they're trying to sell us on. Data warehouses consume huge amounts of energy, all of the networks, the wireless networks, and then our own personal devices. My landline phone, I never have to recharge that. It doesn't even use electricity. It's plugged directly into the telephone line. Streaming consumes huge amounts of energy. And note that the wireless industry is now buying the entertainment industry so that they can have another revenue source. Every time we send and receive on a mobile device, we are consuming energy. Every time we charge and recharge and recharge and recharge our devices, we're consuming energy. And in the background, all those sexy applications that we've been talked into putting on our phones, our tablets, all of those are continuously doing updates and using energy in the background if you're using it through a wireless connection. So lots of room for improvement. Now, as we were going into all the science, I kept asking myself, well, if this is as bad as the science is clearly documenting, why don't we know? And then in 2015, Harvard's Law School Center for Ethics came up with this incredible 59-page report, free and online through this link, called Captured Agency: How the FCC is Dominated by the Industries It Presumably Regulates. So notice this graphic they chose, the revolving door. There's nobody today at the FCC who's looking after us. There is an opportunity now to start getting people who didn't come from the industry to serve on the FCC. So when we make those opportunities available, to make a quick call to your federal legislators to say, hey, please let this woman in on the commission. There is somebody right now that's under consideration, and we'll send out an action item soon. But Captured Agency taught us nobody's looking after our backsides at the federal level, which is why we have to address this at the local and the state level. And then that $30 million study that our National Toxicology program did that concluded clear evidence of cancer and DNA damage. When those findings came out, the gentleman who today, not the ones who commissioned this report 20 years ago, they've all retired or passed on. The gentleman in charge today is Dr. Jeffrey Shuren. He turned around and went to the FCC and said, nothing to look at here. Go ahead, keep those radiation limits. They're fine. One might ask what would ever possess Dr. Shuren to do that. Well, when we look a little further into his background, he's married to a woman who's a partner in a law firm that represents the wireless industry and other big chemical environmental polluters. So we have corruption at all levels at the federal level. And as we'll see in a minute, it goes all the way up to the World Health Organization. So that's all the bad news. The good news is you can totally control your environment over the devices over which you have control. So in your home, where the signal comes into your house through the cabling, fiber optics, or high-speed copper, whatever comes into your house where your router is, flip your router around and you'll see it's got holes in it. These are Ethernet jacks. Get a nice long Ethernet cable, preferably a shielded one. That just means it's got a liner of foil on the inside because there are other man-made electromagnetic fields that pulse out into the room like 6 to 8 feet. And if you're electrically sensitive, that's another thing that you need to remediate. So rather than waiting and wondering, just pay a couple extra bucks and get shielded Ethernet cables. That will take care of the electric and the magnetic fields. Then most people have more than one device in their home today. So you can buy this Ethernet switch, and in a classroom, you could get one that has 28 holes in it so that every student can plug in, and then just get short Ethernet cables. And who knew, you can buy a little adapter to hardwire a phone. You can buy a little adapter to hardwire a tablet or a laptop, and then just go into the settings and turn off every one of your wireless antennas. The cellular, the data, the Bluetooth, the locator, the hotspot, and anybody who upgraded to 5G, you want to turn those antennas off too. You can forward your cell phone calls to your landline, and then maybe your house will be eventually, after your baby steps, like mine, where I have a reading of 5 instead of hundreds of thousands of microwatts per square meter. And these are just ballpark figures of what you might expect to pay, but add it all up, you could fix your house for about $100. So for most people, it won't break the bank. So that's how we hardwire at home. But then let's look and see where other exposures are over which you and I might not have direct control. Utility smart meters. So when I was a little girl, and I'm one of 10 kids, so we played outside a lot. And if we did, hide and seek, I'd be hiding in the bushes, and oftentimes I'd be right where the electric meter or the gas or the water meter was. And I just keep myself entertained by watching the little dials go around on it. Well, that was a strictly mechanical meter. There was no radiation coming from it. There was no digital technology, strictly a mechanical meter that told our utility companies how much of this utility we used every month. Now what the industry has done is started talking our towns into replacing those safe, reliable analog meters that lasted for 40 years, replace them with smart meters or digital meters. Their thinking is that you can have a wireless antenna in there that will monitor how much of this utility consumption you have, and then send a wireless signal to the utility company and do your billing that way. But there's a lot more going on. I measured the radiation coming off of the 2 electric meters on my home. We have one for solar and we have one for electric. That thing pulsed on my meter 17,000 times per day. So if you have a child or a pregnant woman or somebody with an immunocompromise or another health condition or a senior citizen living on the other side of that wall, they're getting radiated night and day. And a lot of people get sick from this. The doctors at the medical conference said this was one of the early onset activators of microwave sicknesses were these smart meters, or heaven forbid, if you live in an apartment or a condo complex and you wind up being right next to the bank of smart meters, or they install smart appliances for washers and dryers right under your condo, people get very sick from this. So they pulse radiation continuously. That radiation can hop on the wires or the pipes of your home because it likes metal. And if it's not properly grounded, that can virtually turn your house into a giant radio frequency antenna. We also have many, many reports all over the country and the world about these things not being installed properly. They're not bringing in electricians to do these installations. They're just training people up as quick as they can who are not qualified to prevent these types of incidents. And for those who care about their data privacy, when you send a wireless signal carrying your data, somebody at the curb with a $100 application on their laptop can grab it. They can hack into your signal and take your information. They can know when you're not home, and they can back up their truck and take all your toys. So lots of reasons why these utility smart meters are a bad idea. They consume a lot of energy. I've seen where they've jacked people's energy bills up. And it's an environmental justice issue. Here in Massachusetts, National Grid went into Worcester, which is an environmental justice community, largely minority families that are working 2 or 3 jobs a day just to keep a roof over the head and food on the table. They may not have time to tune into what these programs are in the community. And I met people out there who became very ill from these smart meters. Once they get them installed in one community, they'll turn around and say, hey, look, this works so well here. Now we're going to roll this program out all across the state. And in National Grid's case, they turned around to the states of Rhode Island and New York and said, hey, look how great it was in Massachusetts. Let's do it in your state too. Well, this is toxic technology and it needs to stop. We need to insist that the utility companies only install non-transmitting smart meters. They can still be smart, but don't use digital technology with wireless signals. Run your equipment and your connections directly to the home's Ethernet system if you want to have data that comes through the internet. Jeremy Johnson is a Silicon Valley engineer. He and his wife, who's a medical doctor, became incredibly ill when a bank of smart meters or smart appliances showed up at their condo. He did a TED Talk, 15 minutes, another excellent resource to share to open the conversation with others. Our states should all be mandating that every citizen has a right to opt out of smart meters. There are bills in Massachusetts. There's a new one that just got introduced in New York. Vermont has had a no-fee opt-out from these for years. So please know everybody should be talking to their states about a no-fee opt-out until the industry actually just hardwires the technology and gets rid of the radiation. The next source of radiation over which you and I do not have direct control is cell towers. The industry comes in and tells our town, wireless is fine, it's all compliant with the Federal Communications Commission's public radiation exposure limits. Well, those were never safety tested. So it's critical that we teach our towns about the non-industry funded science that tells us that we should not have any wireless infrastructure within 500 meters from our homes, our schools, our churches, our senior centers, our hospitals, our playing fields. That number is not just made up. That number comes through the scientific literature. 500 meters is equivalent to 1,640 feet. Now, there is no safe level of microwave radiation in the scientific literature, but when you look at the death rate in the science, we see that start to come down at that 500 meter mark. That's not saying it's safe. It doesn't actually catch up to the general population death rate until about 1,000 meters, which is about 3,000 square feet. So look at the non-industry funded science, share that with your communities. And then you can go out to a website called antennasearch.com. You can put in any address and it will typically give you a 3-mile radius and show you where all the big, or most of them, we're not convinced they have all of them in this database, but most of the cell towers. And then as we see here, these are called macro cell antennas or big cell antennas. they will give you a reading of how many are within 3 miles of your address or your work address or your children's schools. I did our state house address in Boston. And there were so many at the time that I ran this report, it couldn't even give me a 3-mile radius. It could only give me 1 mile. Within 1 mile of our state house, there were 70 cell towers. Those are big cell towers. And then there are 1,184 antennas, these big antennas, within 1 mile of our state house. We have introduced such extraordinary levels of electrosmog. So use these resources, and you can put in any address. This is one for a meeting we were doing in Hyde Park, which is a large minority community. And you can see how heavily densified the industry has put these toxic antennas in. Now we add another entire new layer of electrosmog with 5G or 5th generation technology. The industry is spinning it that 5G will bring us faster entertainment downloads, smart cities, superhighways. But this is a new revenue stream. They are buying up the entertainment industry, and they are setting their sights on putting a radio frequency antenna in every electronic device that you bring home. From your baby diaper, yes, that's true. There's a little pod they can put on your baby diaper so that it will send a radiation signal to your cell phone when your baby soils herself or himself. So now you're radiating your baby, not just from the baby monitor, but from this other device. There's the iPotty, where you can put an iPad right on top of the potty training seat and radiate your child from the toilet seat, unless you know to put it in airplane mode and turn off all the antennas. So they want to put an antenna in everything so that they can harvest your usage data, sell that to third-party vendors who can then try to sell you their products. So there's nothing free online or anywhere. It's all about harvesting your data. Many people are concerned about data security and privacy with all of our data being taken and sold. So 5G isn't replacing 3G and 4G. All those macro cell antennas and towers that we looked at are staying. 5G is the addition of a whole new set of short waves. Right now, 4G carries our cell signals into the building using really long waves. All that's left to monetize on something called the electromagnetic spectrum are these dinky little millimeter waves. And the industry is saying faster download, super highways. But in order for 5G to fly, these little waves can't go very far. And they can't get through objects easily. So wherever they're putting in small cells, they're also including macro cell antennas inside the same canister with a whole new array of many, many little tiny antennas in there for 5G. Their solution is to clear cut trees so that it doesn't block any signals, which is really bad for our environment. And their goal is to put millions of these small cell antennas at the curb, right outside your home and mine, right on top of our schools and everywhere else in our communities, every 2 to 12 houses, so that they can blast this radiation to whatever device you have that's connecting with the internet wirelessly. Senator Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut up in DC was at a congressional hearing with the Commerce Committee, and he was asking the wireless industry how much funding they have invested to ensure that this technology is safe before bringing it to market. And after hemming and hawing, the two industry representatives said, well, we don't know of any independent science that's been done to prove this is safe. So Senator Blumenthal said, so we're basically flying blind as far as health and safety are concerned. And that is the bottom line. Computer World and others are already reporting that 5G is a bad joke. We don't need it. We only want it because we're being told we want it, but we're not getting any faster speeds than what we already had with toxic 4G and 3G technology. In January, Verizon announced that they are deploying all of this 5G small cell technology all over major cities, and they're going to be exposing 100 million people to it. Doctors Rubric and Brown ran studies to show that in these densified areas where we have all of this wireless radiation from 5G and large cell antennas and small cell antennas, that we see higher incidence of COVID-19 and we see higher incidence of death from COVID-19. Because remember, this is an immunotoxicity. This suppresses our immune system. So if you have a suppressed immune system and then you get a pandemic and you get exposed on that, our body has a finite amount of energy with which to try and fight off toxins. Now we've given a huge double burden on our bodies and we lose the battle. So we need to get this toxicity out of our communities. Dr. Magda Havas up in Canada recognizes that our governments have dropped the ball on monitoring this after it came to market. So she is turning to the public and asking them to purchase one of these Safe and Sound Pro 2 radio frequency detection meters. If you do, if you go and buy this meter, they will give you a discount if you participate in her study. It retails for $385. I think I paid $308 for this device. And people all over the country are going out into their communities and following Dr. Havas's protocol, taking measurements and then putting them into the database so that people can see where are these exposures. She wants you to be able to brag about your community, and she uses the brag acronym. Black is where there's such high levels that it's at blackout. R is for red, very high. A is for amber, getting dangerous. Green is for low. Now remember, inside our homes, we want to be at 10 or less. Out in the community, the scientific literature indicates that even if we could get our communities down under 1,000, that would be maybe okay, except for those who already know they're sick from it. You don't want to be anywhere near these exposures. But if you could at least target getting to 1,000 or less in your community and presuming you could get home to a safe environment to detox at night, then that's what we should aim for in our communities. And that was done by a group of scientists at a Salzburg convention. And anybody can go reach out to Dr. Havas here and say, yes, I would like to participate in your study. How do I get that meter at the discount rate? So outdoor measurements, again, we want to be less than 1,000. And somebody in New Hampshire, maybe it was Lori, went to the Westmoreland, New Hampshire Fire Department and measured how much the radiation exposures were there. They were in the green. But in Keene, New Hampshire, where they're starting to install these small cells, they're already in the danger zone. In Nashua, in the red zone. In Concord, Deb Hodgson and I took this measurement during the pandemic where there were very few people walking around with their mobile devices, but it was already on deserted streets in the red zone. And then in Stratham, New Hampshire, where Representative Abrami and Deb and Senator Sherman live, we were in the blackout zone because of a giant cell tower that's right there on top of a neighborhood community. In the North End in Boston, a resident there and I went and took measurements, and this is Hanover Street, which is the wonderful tourist area that has all of our beautiful Italian restaurants. But look at, there are people living right above all of these storefronts here. And what looks to be a beautiful wrought iron street lamp, these are small cell antennas right at the curb where people are standing and milling about all day. So they have put these up all throughout the North End, and people are complaining of radio frequency radiation sicknesses. So that's all the bad news. How do we affect change? Martin Luther King Jr. taught us that when we have important inroads, they come through 3 channels. One, the public engages, which is why we're here to educate you today so that you can know the facts and then make your choices for your personal spaces, and then hopefully work through your communities so that you can help make sure this doesn't show up in your front yard. Eventually the courts rule, and there's some excellent things happening in the courts. and then public policy is enacted to catch up to the science. Now, I've got some great information. For those who have not muted your microphones yet, I would ask that you please do so now. And our co-hosts could actually pull up those participants and hit the mute button for them if you wouldn't mind. So legal solutions, I won't go through all of this, but know the resources are here. The most important one right now, when Dr. Jeffrey Shuren told the FCC they didn't have to change the public radiation exposure limits, the FCC entered their decision in something called the Federal Register when they had an open docket that said, okay, everybody, show us what you got. Is there any science showing harm? There was a lot of science entered into the public record. Even though the FCC still said, what we're doing is fine, we're not changing anything. Once that decision was filed in the public register, then the lawsuits began. The Environmental Health Trust, Children's Health Defense run by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and others sued the FCC for ignoring 11,000 pages of scientific, medical, and citizen evidence of harm. And when the judges in the Ninth Circuit Court in Washington, D.C. in the Court of Appeals, when they're looking at 27 binders full of all this evidence of harm, they turned around to the FCC and said, well, show us your homework. How did you determine that these radiation limits from 1996 have anything to do with protecting the public today? The FCC went, oh, the FDA said it was okay. And so the court said, show us what the FDA did for their due diligence. And lo and behold, nothing. They have nothing to. Okay, I just got a message that I might have been muted, so I just unmuted myself. Apologies if we missed anything, but Fox is still watching the hen house. The FCC got slapped on the wrist and the courts told them to please get on this, protect the children, protect the environment. But until that happens, we need to do the work at the state and local level. Others have sued. This lawsuit paves the way for our states to go back and reclaim the money that we already paid to bring hardwired to the premises for every building out there. The industry took that money and put it up into their wireless bucket and started putting up the wireless infrastructure instead. This lawsuit may empower our states to go back and recoup that money. Our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology now have an active petition that you can go and sign and enter a public comment to the FDA saying, this is an imminent hazard. Please do the scientific review and protect the public. So there's a lot of things happening throughout. All these resources are here for you to look at. But let's talk about New Hampshire, because you have the nation's top action happening today in New Hampshire. As Deb mentioned, Representative Abrami did the deep dive and realized that there's so much science showing harm that the industry, the insurance industry, Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, and others have long since recognized this is a huge risk, right up there with asbestos. They do not cover damages from radio frequency radiation. That's a giant red flag to all of our communities, that our communities can be held liable for damage when we allow this toxic technology in. Again, we talked about the legal fine print that says keep these things off our bodies. New Hampshire wanted to know, why is the FCC ignoring the science? Why do their limits only speak to the heating effect when the science shows you don't have to have heat to have harm? Why do we allow 100 times more radiation exposure than countries like Russia and China and Italy and others? And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect of this toxin? It's bad enough to have one device, but now you have children in a classroom with 20 or 30. Now you have multiple devices all over your home pulsing. And now every time you go to buy a new appliance, your fridge, your stove, your dishwasher, your coffee maker, everything is going to have radiation transmitting unless you know to turn that option off. So I was honored to go up and testify alongside Deb and Lori and Jen and others. The retired president of Microsoft Canada, Frank Clegg, flew in on his own time and dime to tell what the industry is up to. And Dr. Paul Heroux from McGill University, who teaches electromagnetism in their medical school and has done the scientific experiments in his lab and knows that this radiation causes cancer. He drove down and he testified with us. The House Committee on Science, Technology, and Energy voted this bill out favorably. It then went to the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services that voted the bill out favorably. It then went under Governor Sununu's pen, and he signed it into law that there has to be a commission formed to investigate the health and environmental impacts of evolving technology, especially 5G. Once they got into doing their investigation, they realized it's everything wireless, not just 5G. And bless these professionals who sat on that commission. We had two doctors. We had Dr. Paul Heroux. Frank Clegg testified from Microsoft Canada. We had engineers, we had physicists, we had the Attorney General's office, we had the state business offices, we had the wireless industry had seats on the commission, because this is the first time we got everybody to the table at once. And at the end of their scientific investigation, they came out with this groundbreaking 390-page report. And bless Deb Hodgson, she volunteered her time to take minutes at every one of the 13 commission meetings that were held over the course of a year to investigate. So of those 390 pages, there's probably 200 plus that are that are the meeting minutes, because New Hampshire does a transparent process. So you can see how this whole process unfolded. But the first 17 pages of the report, and this is what it looks like. The first 17 pages are beautifully written with their summary executive findings and 15 recommendations for how to go from where we are today with electropollution to safe, hardwired technology to and through the premises. First of all, stem the bleeding. Prohibit any more build out of wireless infrastructure within 500 meters of any of our sensitive areas. Create a registry of harm so that those who are injured by this have some place to go to register their harm, and then public policy can be set based on what is found. Those two recommendations are the first bit that New Hampshire has bit off. Right now, they have a new bill, as Deb mentioned. Rep. Abrami introduced House Bill 1644, which is bipartisan. It asks for these setbacks, and it asks for a registry of harm that would be paid for by industry, just as big tobacco is still paying our states and towns money for the damage that they did. The industry needs to make this right. Dr. Kent Chamberlain is from the University of New Hampshire. He was actively the chair of their Department of Computer and Electrical Engineering when this commission was doing their investigation. He's worked in the wireless industry for 30 years. He's worked on EMFs. And when he heard about this commission, he's like, oh, this can be a slam dunk. Of course, it's fine. I've been in this field for 30 years. Until he had the opportunity to investigate the science on the biological effects. So he's done a complete about face, and he created a 20-minute presentation for all of our legislators, town leaders, school officials, and others to understand the science behind this 500-meter setback. And he makes his slides available so everybody can drill down right into the science. We had hearings on this bill in January and February. And this, once again, was with the House Committee on Science, Technology, and Energy. But some of these are not the same legislators who were represented on this committee a couple of years ago when the first bill went through. So now we're back to square one with legislators who are just coming into the conversation. But now they know they need to be investigating this report and looking at what their colleagues found. So there wasn't enough time for these particular representatives to do their deep dive before they had to report out on this bill. And so they unanimously voted not to kill the bill. 4 of the representatives out of 21 wanted to enact the bill right away. The other 17 said, wait, we just need a little more time to look at this. So they formed what is in New Hampshire called an interim study committee. And that means they're actually going to look at this issue and study it. And 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans raised their hand to serve on this interim study. And today they are holding their first preparatory meeting, and they may be having experts coming in as early as next week to really start doing their due diligence on this issue. At the end of the day, by the end of this year, they have 2 options. One, they can say there's nothing here and we don't think anything should advance. Or 2, they can say in January, we're going to introduce a new bill and tell you what we want to do about this issue. So we are very grateful to the citizens of New Hampshire and to the legislature of New Hampshire for helping us by attending these education forums that we are presenting. We will be doing a couple of them every single month through the end of this year. So we know it's a lot of information to get your head around, but we want you to do your due diligence. Please don't take our words on any of this. Go learn this for yourself, and then let us help you get to safe technology in your community. So I'm going to just whip through what's happening around Massachusetts and other areas so that you don't think this is unique to New Hampshire. Right now, there are more than 150 national groups all over the country, community by community, state by state, who figured this out because too many people are getting sick, the pollinators are disappearing, and we need to take action. If you go to this link, you will be at Americans for Responsible Technology. You will see these 150 plus groups. You may be able to join one locally, or they also have a toolkit to teach you how to start a group in your area because there's no cavalry coming. Public servants, by and large, have no idea this is happening. So it behooves us to provide this education, invite your public servants to these monthly or bi-monthly seminars that we're going to hold so that you and your town can learn together and learn to choose safe technology. Here in Massachusetts, many have fought cell towers successfully. The industry, however, comes into our towns and says, nobody else is talking about this. You guys are the only ones. It must be psychosomatic, or it's just people saying, not in my backyard, which is so far from the truth. This is happening all over the country in every community. So know that there are resources to substantiate this. City of Boston already filed with the FCC saying, we believe the public. We believe these radio frequency radiation limits do not protect the public. Boston joined with other mayors all over the country to sue the FCC. They lost that one, but every court case allows the next one a leg up. Burlington became the first in the nation to do something really important. They came up with a small cell policy that said, you can't just drop and run with this equipment in these small cells. If we give you permission on an application, you have to come back every single year and recertify that this is still compliant with the local laws. And we as a town don't have money to pay for an independent consultant to come in and do that annual recertification on every single one of those small cells. So we're going to assess you a fee, Verizon, or whatever vendors in your town, to do that research every year. Well, the Verizon lawyer was there the night that Burlington ratified their small cell policy, and the lawyer withdrew their 7 small cell applications, saying, we don't want to set precedent for a research or a fee, because they know full well they plan to install millions of these all over the country, and that would cut into their bottom line. Since Burlington did that, other towns in Massachusetts are adopting and even improving on Burlington's. In some communities, like out in Petaluma, California, they flat out say you cannot put wireless infrastructure in a neighborhood in a residential zoned area. So lots of great, great resources. Americans for Responsible Technology takes the best of the best, and they have a sample code that you can take to your town, get your town lawyer engaged, and don't be afraid to hire an expert who can look right at your bylaws and say, yep, you need to change this, this, and that. There are lawyers who specialize in this. Most town attorneys are not experts with telecom law. So I just got really great news. A while back, Easton, Connecticut, when a grandmother brought this issue to their select board, they put a moratorium on rolling out any 5G technology until it can be proven safe. And I just read an article this week that Easton, Connecticut has now reapproved that ban until technology can be proved safe. So good on Easton, Connecticut. This morning, I reached out to their select board, and there's a medical doctor who serves there who said he was still kind of on the fence with what the science is saying. And what an honor to be able to present him with the link to the EMF medical conference. So now he can go get clinically trained to recognize, diagnose, treat, and prevent microwave sicknesses. So there are great opportunities happening all over the world. And you can go to Environmental Health Trust, and they've got a whole database of what's going on all over the world and the US. Schools we should talk about in depth on another day, but please know that Silicon Valley executives are sending their children to schools with no technology, not wireless, not even wired, but no technology, because they know children do not learn best from a screen. Children learn best from trusted adults, from their peers, and from their environment. They're actually going so far as to have their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their children. And yet they force that 21st century classroom campaign into all of our schools. Thank you so much to Patty and Doug Wood of Grassroots Environmental Education. They are the ones who put out the Americans for Responsible Technology project, and they have also launched this Tech Safe Schools national program. You can go out there and have materials to hand right to your schools, or they are even offering to mail them directly to your schools for you and let you do the follow-up. They have a letter for administrators. They have a letter with the legal risks of exposing the school children and faculty to this radiation. And then, of course, they always have the solutions. They have remediation strategies to immediately start reducing this all Wi-Fi all the time, gradually bring it down, and then get away and into hardwired technology to every single device that you're using to connect to the internet. As I mentioned, we'll be having courses coming online again to quickly train in a half an hour. And the Environmental Health Trust has a wealth of printable resources that you can take today and give to your doctors, give to your schools, give to your friends, give to your aunts, uncles, and loved ones to learn how to do this safely. So lots of great resources to help hardwire at home and educate. Again, the medical conference, Dr. Cindy Russell and others founded Physicians for Safe Technology. So every healthcare practitioner has a trusted resource to go to look directly at the science. We have resources for engineers, physicists, technologists, architects, etc. This paper is a really good one. It was an output of that Health and Buildings Roundtable conference that we went to with doctors, scientists, captains of industry, building biologists. All of them contribute to this paper. And then there's additional resources here as well. So lots of things that you can do to help get your mind around this whopper of an issue. So again, we have quick online courses that'll be coming back online next month. If you're not a do-it-yourselfer, that's okay. There are very many people who are not, and just, I have a neighbor who says, I know what my strengths are. I write a mean check. And so there is a profession called building biologists who are highly trained professionals who are credentialed to be able to come into your home or your school or your office and do the remediation. Find out if you've got problems with dirty electricity. Find out if you have high levels of radio frequency radiation exposures. Some are also trained to look for the mold and VOCs, formaldehyde, and other airborne environmental toxicants. So please know that you can go to the Building Biology Institute right here, and they have a directory where you can look for somebody in your area. Many of them will do online consultations if there's nobody nearby and teach you how to take the measurements with their equipment. This award-winning film, Generation Zapped, 72 minutes. It's now available through Amazon Prime. Many libraries have streaming services now called Canopy with a K, K-A-N-O-P-Y, or Hoopla. And many of them carry Generation Zap. So with your library card, you could watch it for free. But this is a lovely way to sit down in your living room with your loved ones and say, wow, I heard something wild today. It could be that wireless is why we are not sleeping right anymore, or why we have these pains or nosebleeds or headaches or our skin's freaking out. Let's watch this film and see what we might come to know. So that's a great way to start the conversation. Who knew? Even on PBS, Burt Wolfe with his travel show, he's already done 2 episodes, thanks to Camilla Reese, who worked with him and leading scientists and doctors on these episodes. And then, as I mentioned, Americans for Responsible Technology, they've got an advocates toolkit where they've done the hard work for you. All you have to do is go grab their flyers, make it work for your neighborhood. They've got yard signs, they've got letters to the editor, they've got a sample bill you could introduce with your legislators. They've got a sample ordinance you can take to your town to make sure that nobody can put a cell tower in your neighborhood. But you better act fast because the industry is already doing it. Mental health. Our kids are watching. Our grandkids are watching. They know what you're doing. If you've got your face in your phone or your tablet or your computer all day and night, guess what? You've just given them permission to do the same thing. So I love this poster with 50 ways to take a break. It reminds us to go out and do all the wonderful things we used to do before we got stuck behind a screen. And some of you may be familiar with the concept of earthing or grounding. There's another huge scientific body of evidence here that every living organism is meant to be connected to the earth in order to receive the earth's healing energy through electrons. Once we started walking off the ground in rubber-soled shoes, driving on rubber-sneakered cars, living off the ground, above the ground in our homes where we're no longer connected, we've lost that healing power of the earth. So I read the first book by Clint Ober and Dr. Sinatra that told us all about the science and that we should all be outside grounding. And I'm like, well, I live in the Northeast now. I can't get out there barefoot for 6 months out of the year. What am I supposed to do? Dr. Laura Conover, poor thing, right as the pandemic hit, she was set to release her book, but she asked me to take a look at her manuscript and I was so honored. And I loved it. I loved it because she's taken it by every season. And now winter, spring, summer, and fall, she's got a dozen or dozens of different ways that you can naturally get outside and ground, even if you need to leave your shoes on. Who knew? Going for a walk, touch the high water content parts of a plant or a tree or a pine needle, and you are instantly grounded with that healing energy. If you have a pet that's on the grass, rub the less furry areas, the snout or the ears, and you are instantly grounded through your pet. They complete the circuit for you. So lots of great resources for us to all learn about natural healing energy. So we're going to wrap this up shortly and then we'll open up for Q&A, but please know there are huge resources free and available. This Reinventing Wires, the Future of Landlines and Networks, is available online, and it is the roadmap for why our communities should not choose wireless infrastructure, but why we should have sustainable, green, hardwired fiber to and through the premises. And it walks our towns through how to do that from leading telecom experts. And again, we always have to measure because the industry says it's fine and we know it's not. So don't measure against industry limits, measure against the biological effects that these meters can show you. And we're blessed that the Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC, already has a principle in place for ionizing radiation. That's the gamma rays, the sun, the X-rays. And we would never leave ourselves or our loved ones in front of any of that for any length of time without protective measures. So the ALARA principle, as low as reasonably achievable, that's what we need to gun for with non-ionizing radiation, radio frequency, man-made electromagnetic fields. We need to transition to as low as reasonably achievable, get rid of as much wireless as we can, and only use it when we're on the go in an emergency. Otherwise, hook up from a hardwired device and do what you need to do. So next steps, again, no safe level of man-made radiation. Dr. Linda Birnbaum, who headed up our government's highest scientific group at the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences, which oversees the National Toxicology Program. In this interview, she states that there are some really good people at the federal level, but there's also a lot of captured agency happening. And so she thinks that in order to empower the good public servants at the federal level, we need to use our voices at the state and local level and keep this conversation front and center so that they change the laws, that toxic part of the Telecom Act in Section 704 that allows the industry to pollute our communities and our homes. So first things first, let's get that House Bill 1644 enacted in New Hampshire. Let's educate the public through these upcoming information sessions. Let's share fact sheets. I wrote this electromagnetic fields fact sheet with the state level Massachusetts Department of Public Health with them in 2016. I was told they would be out in 3 months and they've never seen the light of day. Instead, they put up a page on the state website saying, oh, if you have any concerns, go look at these postings from our captured federal agencies. So we got a lot of work to do, but New Hampshire gives us hope. So feel free to invite everybody in your town to come to these environmental and health forums that we're having. Your town should all be forming tech safety committees now that technology is here to stay. That should be a crucial part of all of our town budgets and town planning. And every town should be speaking up to at least have an opt-out of these toxic utility meters being imposed on our homes. And then let's start developing plans to transition to hardwired in all of our town-owned spaces. And then look at every town's zoning code. If you don't have zoning code, now would be a fine time to put it in, because if you don't have protective measures in, the industry is going to give you an application for a cell tower or a small cell, and there's a time clock attached to it by the federal agencies that says you have to respond within 60 days if we want to put something up on an existing infrastructure, or 90 days if we want to put up a new one. And that is not going to be enough time to get a bylaw written and approved. So you better start taking action now, town by town, until your state at the state level says, we're going to take care of this and we're going to make it law across the land that we will not put toxic infrastructure anywhere near our sensitive areas. And please, again, don't be shy about hiring an attorney who knows what he's doing. Andrew Campanelli used to work for the industry until he figured out the harm. He switched teams and now he represents towns and citizens and helps them to go through their bylaws and tries to defend citizens in court. He wins about 70 to 80% of his court cases if the cell towers and small cells haven't already gone in. Once they've gone in, it's a giant battle that stretches for years, and you're going to be getting sicker and sicker by the day. So the key is to stop this before it goes in. Hire a good attorney who can know right on the spot what your town needs to do. I think his fee to look at your town bylaws is about $8,500, which is short money for the benefit that you're going to get from that. Americans for Responsible Technology has this wonderful checklist to take to your town with their sample bylaw and get started on this. So bring me in to educate. If your town wants to do a town-sponsored forum, I would be honored to do that. We've got great examples where we've done that before. Please start talking to your schools about this. Tonight, every parent should know to turn off the wireless radiation and watch their children's behavior issues calm down, watch their anxiety, watch their depression start coming back to the sweet kids that they used to be, the behavior issues, the nosebleeds, the nausea. We are doing this unwittingly to our children. So look at this, use the resources, start from where you are. If you belong to professional organizations, once you get your mind around this, bring me in. I can do training with your organizations as well. Everybody deserves the right to know. So our last slide here is how to get in touch with us. New Hampshire for Safe Technology. This is their Facebook page. This is their email address. This is our website in Massachusetts for Safe Technology. We've got all the resources, all the science posted here. So we like to partner with New Hampshire as a sister organization. We don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. Just come to Massachusetts for Safe Technology for the resources and keep in touch with everybody in New Hampshire so that you guys can keep moving the needle to safe technology. So I'll stop the sharing now. And I haven't been able to keep up with the chat while I'm presenting, but if one of our co-hosts, Deb, perhaps if there's anything in the chat that you've seen, or if any of our participants would like to raise their hand and ask a question, we would be honored to take a few minutes to do that as well.
I've seen a few things. One question was, what is the FCC safety limit in microwatts per meter squared or milliwatts per meter squared?
I think it's like 1.6 kilograms per, I don't know. Does anybody know that off the top of their head?
I did post the, I went onto the FCC website and posted, I think she's trying to get that maybe drilled down a little bit.
Yeah.
1.6 watts per kilogram.
Yeah, I know. It's hard because different types of man-made electromagnetic fields use different units of measurements. So it can get very complicated, which is why it's great to have a meter that does all that calculation for you. You can certainly go out to Physicians for Safe Technology. I know Dr. Cindy Russell has a conversion chart out there, and you can find those answers there. For me and my simple mind, I prefer to go green, yellow, red, and know where to get the heck away from this radiation. So, but I also respect that those who are in the field need to work with those conversion numbers. So if you go to Physicians for Safe Technology, you'll be able to find it there.
There was another question from Anya. She said she lost a bee colony in Massachusetts to new EMF sources and was wondering how she can do a mass mailing or get her neighbors involved who probably aren't even aware that's an issue.
Okay, that is such a great question. If you go to Americans for Responsible Technology, they have a toolkit, and in their toolkit, they have a letter that you can modify and invite your neighbors to come into the conversation. Maybe you do a living room conversation, maybe you do a program at your library. You could screen Generation Zapped to help them learn about this. But if you, when you get my slides, or if you want to go out to Massachusetts for Safe Technology on the resources page, you'll find a link to the environmental impact. And there are studies there that talk about the impact that this is having on the bees and the pollinators so that you can have the science right in your hand. But yeah, we've got so many great resources to get you started with. So start with speaking to your neighbors. It's always best if you have a radio frequency detection meter in hand. And once you have a meter, the two things that I found most useful to people to really crystallize that this issue is not just conspiracy theory or theoretical, but that it's actually real. One is to show them the legal fine print in all of our devices that says, keep this away from you or you're going to exceed the FCC limits for radiation, which were never safety tested. And two, show them, as I did today with that meter, how much radiation is coming out of your own device and their devices. Offer to do a walkthrough of their house. Give the meter to the kids. Let them have like a scavenger hunt. Get everybody actively involved in this. And then you start to have community where you can then come to solutions with your schools in your town. But please don't go it alone. If I could have a do-over, you know, and I volunteered in my town for 20 years. I taught CCD in our religious community. I had half the kids in my class. And I ran our local education foundation. And, you know, I'm little. I'm not like a scary, imposing person. But when I started raising my hands on this issue, I got crickets. If I had a do-over, I would not have gone right to my schools or right to my town. What I would have done, and we didn't have Generation Zapped back then, but I would have gotten all my girlfriends, all the fathers of the kids out on the playing field that my kids played with. I would have gotten everybody into my room or my library or my living room and said, hey guys, we really need to watch this, and watch that film and watch everybody go, oh. And then their head's going to spin for a while. And when my kids were little and they were upset about something, I'd say, okay, go scream into a pillow, get it physically out of your body, and then come back to the table and we'll talk. Well, when you're done with today's video, you might want to go scream into a pillow for a little bit too, but let people have time to process and then get something else right back on the calendar to say, what can we do about this, right? If somebody in your community has a meter, everybody can figure out what their exposures are, and then device by device, start figuring out how they can get to as low as reasonably achievable. But don't go it alone. Get people surrounding you educated first. Always try and be as calm and professional as you can, even if there's a little person inside you screaming up and down, we are frying our frickin' kids. If you come out with that as an opener, you're going to turn people off because they're addicted to their devices. And I don't use that word addiction lightly. Some people biologically are physiologically addicted. That radiation is hitting the same receptors in the brain as drugs, alcohol, tobacco, pornography, gambling, and now we have digital addiction. So some people will want to know right away. Some people will say, oh, we're all going to die anyway. But I tell them, you're not going to want to die this way. If you have ever seen somebody dealing with a brain tumor or a child going through all these behavioral issues where their brain is literally getting changed by radiation, this is not a choice any parent would make if only they knew they had a choice to hardwire and have even faster, better technology than anything wireless will ever deliver. So that was long-winded, but I hope I answered your question.
There was one more question, Cece, from Wisconsin, actually, wondering what's the difference between the state laws in New Hampshire and hers, and how are they different from other states? Is there any place that you know of that makes that easy to look up?
I have something in my personal research repository, which I call Understanding EMFs. I have the links to that at Massachusetts for Safe Technology on our website, on the resources page. And I have a page called Bills in Other States. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a comprehensive list, but as people teach me about what they're doing in their states with their legislators, I add information to that. For example, today, I just added that new bill out of New York that's asking for people to have the right to opt out without being penalized a fee of the utility smart meters for, I think theirs are for gas and electric meters. So as I find it, I put it up there, but you can also go out to the Environmental Health Trust and they may have some resources for you there as well. But by all means, don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. If you read one of our bills that looks good to you, take that at your earliest convenience to your legislators and get a bunch of people in your town to do that action with you. Because again, one voice easily swept under the rug. A group of concerned citizens. I had legislators tell me that if 3 people from their district call up and talk about something, that gets their attention. 3 people. If you have 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, now you've got an issue to be worked on. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay.
I think that's it.
All right. Do any of our co-hosts wish to have any closing remarks today?
I did want to chime in. I think for a lot of people, it's daunting learning about this subject. It's daunting. There's a lot of information to cover. There's a lot, there's a lot of that initial feeling like, living without our technology. It's going to be really hard to do that. And I just want to make some simple suggestions that, it really doesn't take a lot. I'm sensitive, have been for 12 years, but we don't live without in our home. We use these. So this is something that you can use. This is for an iPad. This one's for a Chromebook. So this is essentially something that you can use for your computer to hardwire it. So that you don't have to have those, wireless pulses going on your home. We have a Comcast internet Ethernet. And all we did was ask them to disable the wireless capability. So we have a Comcast supplied internet, and we just plug our cords in the back of that. We run that to our wireless our computers. We use these so that we don't have to be wireless. We also have a Roku. So there's 3 in the back. There's 3 internet cords that we can, or telephone cords that we can put in the back. So we have one for each of our computers. My husband runs a business from the home, as do I. So we run each of those to our computer, and then the other one we run to our Roku. So we have all the creature comforts of the devices, but without being, bombarded by these EMFs. So I think, just simple steps, and also turning off your Wi-Fi at night. That will be huge. And as Cece mentioned earlier, you'll see that you're getting better sleep. You feel better. You have, maybe less aches and pains, less headaches. A lot of these symptoms are contributed to, wireless. So just making those simple changes that we all mentioned here, they're really simple, and they'll make a world of difference. So.
Excellent, Jen. Thank you. And again, I'm so sorry that you and your son were harmed by a cell tower in Connecticut that forced you to relocate to New Hampshire. So, you landed in a good spot, and hopefully through your wonderful legislators in New Hampshire before too long, we'll have protection so that you don't have to wonder if a cell tower is going to show up right on top of you in your new home, right?
Yeah.
I have one more thing.
Sure, go ahead.
To go along with Anya's story about her bee colony collapsing. Some of you have heard the story before, but for those who haven't, within 2 months of shutting off our router and getting rid of wireless in our home, the flower we had in our kitchen window grew 15 inches in 2 months. And that really got my kids' attention, who originally thought it was their mother's issue. So it affects everything. And sometimes the changes can be sudden, and the benefits can be dramatic, even if you weren't aware that that's how you were being affected, or your family, or your pets are another. So
yeah, anxiety in pets is a big one. There was just a pet summit last week, and Dr. Patricia Jordan did a presentation that she called EMF, RF, the mother of all toxicity. Because the pets are getting very harmed by this, as are the pollinators. Lori Schreier, please join us.
Hi, I just wanted to add something, because one thing that often goes under the radar, so to speak, is the fact that cordless phones are as bad or worse than cell phones.
Yes.
And most people have cordless phones and don't have the wired phones anymore, which I do, and you can still buy them. And those, they're so convenient. You can travel around the house with them. You're better off using your cell phone, because the base station is giving off the signal 24/7. And if that's anywhere near where you sleep, that's the worst. So I would say to everyone, get rid of your cordless phones completely. And if you want a landline, get one that is corded and use that.
Yeah, I paid like $29, but you got the same one, Jen.
Same one.
Like $29 at Staples, and I have these all over my house. It's got a great speaker phone on it, which I use for work.
We should do an
and-
ad.
Yeah, well, I don't mind. This is an AT&T CL 2909.
I have the same.
Yeah, the reason why I did this is I went out onto one of the forums online with people who are electromagnetically sensitive to see what they recommend. And the reason why this one was recommended is because it only has the telephone cord. It doesn't also have an electrical cord. So the display is run by battery. Because for people who are electro hypersensitive, even the electricity, remember I mentioned those electric and magnetic fields, that can interfere with their biological systems and stop them from having good health. So lots of solutions at every turn, everybody. So don't be shy. We hope you'll come back. You're welcome to listen to these talks as many times as you want. I know I still learn every single day from my peers and colleagues in this work. And then you can come back as it soaks in and ask more questions. Then you can bring with you others who are maybe dubious. Maybe they don't want to know. Maybe they never knew, but maybe they're a little curious. Bring them and let them listen. You know, we can bring a horse to water. We can't make him drink. We know that, but we can present the information and then give you slides so that you can do your own independent investigation. Bring your town leaders, bring your school leaders, bring the person who's heading up your PTO or PTA, right? Bring the nurse from your schools. We're doing these once a month right now at noontime, and then once a month in the evening at like 6 p.m. So that if people need to do it during their work time, or if they want to do it after work, hopefully we can accommodate that. And I know Jen has been great about putting these up. She created a not only a Facebook page, but also a YouTube account. And so she's making every one of these seminars available online. So you can go back and revisit, try and figure out what it was we said. And we hope we'll see you again soon. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Have a tech safe day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.